Good afternoon and welcome to our Wednesday webinar. Today we're going to be talking about Stop the Inbox Backups, which is one of our Formspace webinars. We're going to be talking about some advanced features of Formspace. We will start with one workflow, creating a first workflow, and then we'll go with some other things, but we're not actually going to be setting up questions today. If you have further questions after today, feel free to email us at training@edgeaphoria.net and we can figure out some way to get you the information that you need. Usually today, there are two of us on the Formspace webinars, but my partner Joel is off this week, so I'm flying solo. And because I'm flying solo, I'm going to ask that you put your questions in as we normally do. Oh, I forgot to say, I am Paige Parker. I'm one of the training and implementation specialists here at Edgeaphoria, and I will be the presenter today. You can find your help resources when we, for any webinar that we do, any training that we do, we always have help out there somewhere. So if you were in Strive, the help would be over on the left-hand side. If you're in any of our other apps, the help is going to be up at the top right-hand corner, or even from the home screen, the top right-hand corner. And that will get you to articles about everything that we're going to talk about today. As we go through today's agenda, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the question box that's as part of your webinar panel. I will probably have to stop in between each step that we take and answer questions. I won't be able to answer them as we're going through like we normally do because it's just me. And so I will stop and look at the questions when I can and try to get those answered for you. So today we're going to be talking about creating workflows, multiple workflows for forms, using sections in forms. That's another way that you can break things up and get additional functionality out of your forms. And then we'll close with a few tips and tricks. So if I'm going to check one time, no questions before we start. So I'm going to go ahead and jump in to our first item, which is creating workflows. And I'm going to go over to my demo site. So I'm going to log into Formspace just like you would. I'm logged in as an administrator right now, so I have administrative rights and can manage any of the district level forms. And I have to go back to my cheat sheet for a minute because I put notes up here telling me which form I'm using for each part. Okay, personal recommendation form is what I'm using for setting up the very first workflow. So I'm going to go into manage. And I'm going to go to my district forms because I know that's where this form is located. And I'll go into general forms, and this is where I have all my samples that I'm going to be using today. You can have forms in any of these folders. These are all things that are set up for you when you first go into Formspace. You will have a place for district forms, a place for school forms, a place for school surveys. All of those are built in for you. One thing that I like to say at the beginning of any Formspace session is that any form that you do across the board, no matter whether you do it a little bit differently at one campus or another, I would create them as district forms because you can create them as district forms and then make the changes, and we'll talk about that today, make the changes that will make them different for each one of your sections, whatever that happens to be. So you can have, the same form, but we do it a little bit differently at middle, a little bit differently at high. You can set that up in the workflows. So setting your forms up at the district level as a district form is going to put all the data in one place. And at the end of the year, if you have to pull the data out of the forms and then combine it into one form to get district data, that's a pain. But if all of the forms put the data in the same place in the district form level, then you can pull that data out all together and sort it however you want to. So that's my one little tidbit that I will start with. And that's why I'm working with the forms in this section. Okay, I can't talk and work at the same time, so I'll have to confess that I'm going to go find Jenny. She just joined us, and I'm going to promote her so that she can answer some questions. So Jenny is now on with us, and come on, let me Okay, Jenny now has the rights to answer questions, so if you want to go ahead and throw those questions in anytime you can. And thank you for joining us, Jenny. And if
Yeah,
you have anything
I'm
that you
sorry. I
want
meant
to,
to do it sooner, but I had something come up and I joined late. So I mean,
that's always the way. And I didn't even see your name in the list because I had closed
yeah,
my
it's all
window.
right.
If you have anything that I missed, jump in and let us know, and then Jenny will be answering questions if she can as we go through. So we're starting with creating a workflow. So I'm going to go down to that recommendation for an employee. No, this is the one I wanted, personnel recommendation form. And this form is already created. So when I go to the questions tab, there are already questions there. This form is ready to go. We're not going to talk about adding questions, but up here at the top is where your buttons are, where you would create the form if it didn't exist like this one does. Since the form is ready, I'm going to go on to the workflow tab because that's what we're talking about today. And when you go to the workflow tab for the first time, it's always going to say default. It's always going to be defaulted to all schools, and it's always going to say no recipients selected unless you have gone in and added somebody. So this is what it looks like when you first go in. I'm going to double click on that title, default, and then here's where I will build my workflow. I've got two tabs. One is general, one is where I'm going to put the steps in, actually create the workflow. But on the general tab, I can say which schools I want it to go to. In this case, I'm going to leave it at all schools, but I could limit it and only check specific campuses. So this is where you can create those workflows, and we're going to do one in a few minutes that has multiple workflows that I'll show you how you can build that for different processes of the same form. So here, I can leave the title at default, but I like to change it to something that I will recognize. So, if this form, this is a personnel recommendation, maybe I'm going to call this my HR workflow. Or I could just call it human resources, but that's going to give me something that tells me this is going to go to HR people. And when I look at the name of that workflow, I have an idea of what's going to happen there. The form is still going to come from all campuses. Anybody in the district will be able to submit it, but this just gives me a clue as to what's going to happen in this workflow. Okay, so now I'm going to go to my workflow tab, and that message said that it needed recipients. I can add recipients here, which means they're going to get a copy of it, but I can also add them in my workflow, which is what I'm going to prefer to do here. So I'm going to go to my workflow and set up my steps here. So once I open the workflow screen, I have the ability to add or delete workflow steps. So I'm going to click on my add a workflow step, and I have three options. I can create a step that will ask somebody to approve this form and then pass it along, or I can have a step that just notifies somebody just to let them know it has been submitted and this is what's going on. Or I can do what's called a free flow step, which is our answer to if then logic. We don't have in this form builder the option of saying if the person wrote social studies for their subject, send it to the social studies department chair, and if they put math, send it to the math department chair. We don't have that logic, but what we can do is a free flow step where you select a gatekeeper, a person who is going to make that decision. So in a free flow step, the form would come to me if I'm set up as the person, and then when I get that form, I would look at it and say, oh, this is a math person. It needs to go to the math coordinator, and I would send it to them. So it's sort of like that if-then logic, only manually. Okay, so I'm going to say I want an approval step first of all. So I have a couple of ways that I can set this approval up. When I click on that approval, or when it's highlighted, this orangey color like it is now, down at the bottom, I'm going to see some options. Who's going to be approving this step? Is it a staff member or is it a group? So for this one, I'm going to say staff member, and I would go in and I would type the person's name, and then I would hit my search button, my little magnifying glass over there. And then when I find that person, I'm going to highlight them. and I'm going to click Save. So now up at the top, it tells me this step will be approved by Milo Parker, a staff member. So I know exactly what has happened in my process. The other option that I have is to have I'm going to say a second approval. Maybe Milo is the instructional or let's see, maybe Milo is the first person in the office at the campus level, so it's going to go to them first before it goes up to the district level. So then I'm going to say I want to add another workflow step, and this will be a second approval. This time I'm going to say I want a group to approve. So I'm going to click Group, and when I click on Group, I'm going to see a list here. All of these that have the wrench on them, it's people and a wrench. Or if I scroll down, if I had some that had buildings on them, those are from the profile. So if in your profile you have checked that you are a pre-K teacher, you're going to be in that group. No matter what campus you're on, you're in the pre-K teachers group if that's what your profile says you teach. So my profile would have been, I would have been in the 10th grade teachers group, and in the 12th grade teachers group, and in the language arts teachers group, because that's what my profile said. I was a language arts teacher and I taught 10th and 11th and 12th grade. So that's what those are the groups that I would have been in. There are also groups created by your campus, and I would have been in my campus group as well. So for this one, up at the top, you can create your custom groups, and I'm going to choose a custom group. I'm going to say that it's going to the counselors, and so that's going to be the person on my campus who approves it. Now, because these are district-wide groups, I don't want this form to go to every counselor in the entire district. I want to limit it to just the counselor at my school. So over here on the right, under Options, I'm going to check the little box that says Limit to School. And that way, it's not going to go to every counselor. It's only going to go to my counselor. I also have over here under Options Require All. So if there were 3 counselors at my campus, they would all 3 get it. And the way it is set up now with just Limit to School, the first one who clicked on Approve, it's gone, and the other 2 don't have to worry about it. If I want all 3 of them to approve it, then I can say require all of the counselors at my school to approve this before it goes on. So you have some options as to how you want it to act when you're going through that process. I was going to scroll down and see. You'll notice sort of toward the bottom, there are some groups that are not teachers. Superintendents, principals, paraprofessionals, those are also created by the profile, because that's one of the options. When you check teacher, somebody else might check other, they might check paraprofessional, and so they're going to be put in these groups. These groups, any of the ones that have the wrench on them, are only as good as your users' profiles. So if they are not great about keeping their profiles up to date, then these groups may not be accurate. I'm going to minimize this and go over to my management piece. I'm going to get out of Formspace for a minute, go over to management, and here's where you would manage those user groups. So the system groups that we were looking at that had the wrench, they're all right here. And when I click on any of those groups, it's going to show me all the people in my district who have checked 3rd grade teacher in their profile. And I can look at the principals and see everyone who has checked principal in their profile. There might be some people in here who are assistant principals, but they checked principal instead of VP. There might be some people that checked principal, but they're not really principal. It was a mistake. They checked it by accident. So these groups are only as good as the people keep their profiles up to date. But what I can also do is come over here to custom groups, and in my custom groups, I can say I want to create a new group, and I'm going to call it Building Principles. And then I would go in and manually add, I'm going to say I want to add staff, and I'm going to add a principal here. Yes, do that. Then I'm going to select him. So now he's in my group. I want to add some more staff. So I'll come over here and say, I'm going to promote Milo to principal now. And so now I have 2 principals in my group that I built that I called building principals. These groups can be more accurate because you can manage them. So you can go in and look and make sure that the right people are in this group. That's the good thing and the bad thing. The good thing is you can control it. The bad thing is you have to control it. So that's work that you have to do. But you'll notice I have some groups set up for people that I might want to use separately, either in Formspace or in Workshop or Strive, the workshop portion. I've got counselors set up separately. I've got a software review committee because one of my forms gets reviewed by people on that committee. I have a software testing flow that it goes through for those things. I have substitute managers from different campuses. So you can set up whatever groups you want to and custom groups, build them however you want to, and then they will show up in Formspace when you're back there. So I'm going to go back to Formspace and pop up my workflow again. And this time, when I look at my groups, I've got those same groups that I had before, and I can select my counselors, say I want to save that. And now it's not going to tell me who, it's not going to have a person's name anymore, but it's going to say that it's approved by the counselors, which is a custom group. I can also go in and do a workflow step that's just notification. So when I do notification, I get a few different choices down here. I can notify a specific staff member. So if this was a request for a room to be reserved, I might want to send a notification step to the person who needs to turn the AC on after hours, or I might want to send a notification to the custodians who will need to clean up after that meeting, or anybody else who's involved in any way. So you can send it to a specific staff member. I can send it to a group of people. I can send it to a specific campus, or I can send it back to the requester and let them know what's going on, or I can send it to an outside email address. So if you have someone that you contract with for specific things, or if this is a room reservation for a presenter who is not in the district, I can include that presenter as getting the email saying, yes, this has been approved and it's set up and ready to go, whoever you need to send it to. In this case, I'm going to say it's going to the requester so that they get notified that it's been through the whole process. And down at the bottom where it says notes, I can say your request is now not approved. So when they get, yes.
Paige, I do have a question, and I might have answered it wrong. It said, she asked if, I'm sorry, my dog is in my lap and he's snoring. Y'all hear that? That's what it is. If can they, through Active Directory, have profiles automatically updated, or is just the setting in management that they check that forces them to update their profile each year?
That's a very good question. And unfortunately, Active Directory does not control the entire profile. It only controls their username and password.
Okay.
So, but that's a good point. I will show you, for those who don't know, I'm going to go back over to the management piece. And this is something that I recommend doing at least once a year, if not once a semester. It kind of depends on your district and how many changes you have, how much fluctuation there is in teaching assignments. But as the administrator, you can go into the management app, go to manage users, and when you click on manage users, this stuff down here at the bottom pops up. And if I go to manage user profiles, there's a little button up here that says reset profile check. And when I push that button, everyone in my district, when they log in the next time, it's going to force them through that profile wizard just like they were a brand new user. It's going to show them the data that's there, but it's going to make them go through and look at it so that hopefully they'll go, oh, that's what I taught last year. I need to change that. My recommendation is send out an email on Monday, tell them you're going to do it, and that the following Monday when they log in, they're going to have to reset their profile or update their profile, and give them some clues as to the things that you want to make sure they're checking. And then before you walk out the door on Friday, hit that button. When they come back in on Monday, they'll have to go through that process.
And this also at the beginning of the year, and this is completely off topic, but it's really important. At the beginning of the year, this will move them to the right campus in Strive. So you don't have to move to the right campus. When they reset their profile, it moves them to the right campus in Strive.
That's why I recommend doing it at least once a year at the beginning of the year, because you'll clean up all those people who moved over the summer, and that will clean them. The management piece manages everything. So it manages not just their groups in Formspace or their assignment to a campus in Formspace, but also in Strive, in Aware, in everything. Their profile controls all of that. So if they update and say, oh yeah, I moved to a new campus, that's going to fix it so that they show up in the right place for their administrators. Good point, Jenny. So it's a quick and easy thing for you to do, and it gets your profile data updated. I would recommend doing it at the beginning of each semester if you have a lot of transition in your district, because you might have some people who move or change at semester. Okay, so I'm going to go back again to my workflow, and I've got that notification step in there, and then the last step I will talk about in another one. I'll talk about another form. We'll talk about free flow. So right now I've got a 3-step workflow that applies to all schools. It goes to Milo, it goes to the counselor at that campus, and then they'll get notified. Over on the right-hand side, there are 2 buttons that to me are really important. I'm going to click on Verify Workflow, and that's going to show me for every campus, do I have a green check mark or do I have a red minus sign? If it's a green check mark, then that means it's going to work at that campus. But as you can see, I have some problems here. And those problems include 2 things. One, Milo is not at this campus, and he doesn't have rights, so he won't be able to approve. And then also in step 2, there's nobody from this campus in my counselor group. So I've got problems with every step. If I went back and changed my process, I'm going to do this just so that you can see what we've got going on. I'm going to change approval step 1 to a group, and I'm going to use the principals group. That's one of those profile groups. I'm going to say limit to school and save. And then on the second one, again, I'm not going to use one of my custom groups. I'm going to use, let's see, I'm going to use the superintendents, limit to school, and I don't need to do that. I'll just leave it like that and say save. So now that I've changed it to be system groups, there should be somebody from each campus in the system groups. And now I should see some green check marks. It's thinking. Ooh. I don't know why. What did I do here? Oh, I didn't save that's what it is. I didn't save my step down here. All right, let me close and verify again. Okay, now they're changed, and I've got green check marks for some of my schools. I still don't have a green check mark at facilities and maintenance because I don't have a principal there, but I do have the green check marks at my other campuses. That to me is a lifesaver, being able to look through and know if the workflow is going to work correctly. Everything's going to be set up the way you want it to. I want to see those green check marks all the way. If you have a form that's not working correctly at all of your campuses, then you can go in, check everything, make sure that all your steps are right, hit the Reprocess button, and Reprocess will take any forms that got stuck because it wasn't working at a campus it will run them back through the whole approval process. So even if the first person had approved them, but the second person, that step was broken, it's going to put them back to that first approval and make them go through the process again after you have fixed it. So you can catch those forms that get stuck with your reprocess button. You can make sure that your workflow is going to work by checking that and make sure everybody has that check mark. That's what you want to see, is green for everybody. Okay, Jenny, do you have any other questions right now about creating a workflow?
No, no, we had one question about, would step 1 and 2 happen simultaneously, or is it like step 1 then step 2?
That is a very good question, and I'm assuming you answered it, but I'm going to say it out loud for everybody who hasn't seen that yet. Approval steps wait until the approval happens. So when it came to step 1, it would sit there under step 1 until that principal approved it. And you will find that sometimes that happens, and you have to go in and figure out where it got stuck and go tell that person to approve it. Once the principal has approved it, then it moves on to step 2, and it'll be waiting for the superintendent to approve it. Once the superintendent approves it, it goes on to the notification step.
And
now,
then she followed up with the question, you may be fixing to say this, can 2 people be notified or asked for approval simultaneously?
Absolutely. So they can't get approval simultaneously because the approval step does go, it waits on that person before it goes to the next step. The only way they can get simultaneous approval is if you had 2 principals in the same group. If I had multiple principals and I said require all, then all of the principals would get it at the same time because they're in that same step. But that would be the only way that they would all get an approval step at the same time. The notification steps, though, do go at the same time. As soon as the approval happens, it just goes boom, boom, boom with as many notifications as you have. So I could add another notification step that was going to go to custodians, and both the requester and the custodian would get their notifications simultaneously. Those are good questions. Okay, I'm going to close this workflow, and we're going to go on to the next step, or our next part of the process, which is multiple workflows. So I'm going to go to my IMAP form, which is back in management, and it's in a district form, general forms. There's IMAP. And now my dog's going crazy because the UPS man just showed up. Sorry. So on my IMAP form, I again have some questions. This form is ready to use, but this form has different sections. So you can see as we come down here, there may be some different things that different groups are going to do, or it may be that the process is just different. So again, when I go into the workflows tab, I'm going to see the default. I'm going to open it up and we'll look at the workflow here. I'm going to call this one elementary. And I'm going to have a different workflow for my elementary schools and my secondary schools, because at secondary, maybe I've got department heads, and at elementary, I have instructional coaches. So they may not have the same exact process for where the form is going to go. The form is the same, but who approves it and what order it gets approved in may be different from campus to campus. So I'm going to say for this particular workflow, because I'm calling it elementary, I'm just going to check off my elementary campuses. Oh, I have to limit it before it lets me check them. There we go. Y'all don't let me jump over anybody. I'm going as fast as I can, so I don't want to miss any of my elementaries. Okay, so I select the elementary campuses. That's all I want for this particular workflow. I'm going to save it, and it's going to tell me I need a recipient, and I'll do that on the workflow tab. And then I'm going to come over here and add my first step. So my step here is going to be that it's going to go to a group, and at the elementary level, it's going to go to, let's see, who do I have that I could send it to? At the elementary level, because I don't have well, no, I do have instructional coaches. We'll just say that it's going to my instructional facilitators and coordinators at the elementary level. So that's who I'm going to pick. I'm going to limit it to the school that they're with, and I'm going to save that. And then a second step could be that it goes to someone else. Maybe it's going to go to my principals this time. There are my building principals. And again, I'll limit to school and save. So I've got a workflow that's going to work for elementaries because it goes to instructional facilitators and then building principals. So I can go back and make sure I save one more time, and then I'm going to close that workflow, and it's set up, it's named, I have campuses that it's going to go to, and I have approvers in there in my steps. Now I want to add a second workflow, and I'm going to call this one secondary. Same form, but this time I'm going to say I want only my high schools and middle schools. Hogwarts is a middle school and high. Middle. I think the Technology Center might be a secondary campus. Okay. Oh, missed Indigo High School. There we go. All right, so now I've got all my secondary campuses, and I'm going to save. And then I'm going to go over to the workflow. This time, they don't have the instructional people that we have at the elementary, so this time it's going to go to the principal first. And I'll limit to the school and save. And maybe that's it. Maybe from there it goes to a district person, or maybe it goes to specifically to a person. So after it's approved by the principal, then it's going to go to an individual. So I have two separate processes, but it's the same form. So in the end, all of my data is going to be in the same place. My processes are going to happen, but everything's going to stay in one form. This doesn't separate the data, and it doesn't make it use another form. So I don't have to have two copies of it over here, one called elementary IMAT and one called secondary IMAT. I can have one form, one pile of data. It'll still have their school listed in there, so I can sort it out. I can put it into a spreadsheet and do whatever I want to do with it. But it can go through the process that it needs to go through for whatever group you want it to be. These different groups in my example were elementary, secondary, but it could be that I set up a workflow for math teachers, for science teachers, for social studies teachers, and I put the person who is in charge of that subject as one of the approvers. You can set up your workflows any way you want to, as long as it's tied to the profile of the person who is going to use it. So they would have to be listed as a math teacher for it to go with math. So you can set up your groups in your workflows however you want to and have those multiples. Any questions about multiple workflows?
We're good right now.
Okay, yay. All right, then I'm going to go on and talk about sections, because this is another way that you can separate out the processes in your forms. And I'm going to go over to the bullying form. And so when I look at the questions on this form, I have questions that are answered by the person who witnessed the incident. So it might be a teacher, it might be somebody in the cafeteria or in the library, but they're reporting something that they saw. And they're going to say who was the victim, what happened. They're going to select a statement that best describes what happened, talk about any injuries. And then when it comes down here, all the rest of the questions are supposed to be filled out by someone else. So I want to make sure that the questions below this blue-gray line cannot be completed by the person who does the top half, because they're not supposed to be. In order for that to happen, when I go over to my workflow, I'm going to create some sections. So I'm going to say, I need a section. I'll click on one, and you'll notice that the default is for everything, every question in my form to be done by the requester. So I'm going to come up here and say I need a section 1 and a section 2. You always have requester, so that's like section 0. Everything that the requester does is not part of the sections over here. They're separate. But when I scroll down and I get to the part that says okay, I'm lost. Here we go. All questions from here on to be answered by HR. That's really not a question that anybody can do, but I'm going to put it in section 1. So section 1 is where it goes after. That means the requester can't do anything there. When was it received by admin? That's going to be a section 1 question. And what investigation was conducted? Now, maybe the first question, that's just somebody in the front office who's going to mark it off and record it. But then it's going to go on to an administrator who's going to actually do the investigation and fill out the rest of these questions. So that's where my section 2 comes in. So it went from the campus person who witnessed it to somebody in the front office who recorded it to someone who is going to do the investigation and make a final decision about it. So I'm going to assign all these last questions to section 2. Now, this is assigning them to the section, but I still have to say who is the section 2 person, who is the section 1 person. So I've assigned them out. I know which questions are going to be done by the individual who initiates the form. I know where it's going to go next, and somebody's going to do just one thing. And then I know it's going to go, and the last person is going to do the rest of those questions. So I'll say, okay. And then I have to publish. It always tells me that. So I'm going to come over here and say publish. That's what makes my sections visible. Now when I go into the workflow, I'm going to see that this applies to all schools, and I'm going to go over to my workflow, and I already have some steps here. So I know that the first step is going to be approval, and the approval is going to be, actually I need a step before this. So I'm going to say I need another approval step, and I'm going to move it up, and that step is going to be a group, and I'm going to find, well, I'm going to pretend like I have my, well, I do have office professionals. There we go. So I'm going to say it's going to go to my office professionals. Ideally, I would want to have like a front office secretaries group, and that's who this one would go to. But it could be whatever group you want. Question, Jenny?
Yeah, just real quick, show them where the you want everybody in the group to approve it. That option is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm saying that it's going to all of my paraprofessionals. Like I said, ideally I would have a custom group, but I would want to probably limit it to the school so that if it happened at the high school, it goes to the high school secretary. If it happened at the elementary, it goes to the elementary secretary. If I did want every single secretary to get it, I would say require all, and I would not say limit to school. Or if I wanted to limit it to the school, but I had 3 different secretaries, then I would say require all. So that's how you make it where everybody has to do it in the group. And I can say everybody in the group at my school or everyone in the group district-wide. So you can do it either way. I'm probably going to say limit to school and leave it like that. Now, I need to also say this first step, this approval step, that was my section 1 person. So I have to come down here to this above my approver, and I have to say they're doing the section 1 questions. So now when it goes to the paraprofessional at that campus, they are going to do 1 question, which basically says, when was it received? And they're going to fill that in and pass it on. So I'm going to save that one. Then the second step is for it to go to the principal who's going to investigate. So I'm going to find my principals group. It might be this principals group, or I might come down and use my principals group from down here. Again, I'm going to limit it to the school. And I also need to say, what questions are they doing? They're doing all of the section 2 questions. And so I'm going to save that. In this particular instance, I don't need a free flow step, so I'm going to delete that one. And then when it's all said and done, my requester is going to be notified.
So when Lori just asked, and I know how this works in Aware with item banks, but I don't know in Formspace. If you deny a form, do you have a place to put a message like why you denied it?
Yes, you do. And let me see if I can, just for the sake of what we're doing today, I'm gonna change the order here just so that I can show you that. So let me save what we've got going on here. I'm going to verify just to make sure I've got a campus that it's going to work. Come on, show me, show me, show me. It's thinking, 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 thinking. There we go. Okay, so blue is going to work. All right, so I'm going to go in and I'm going to create a form. I'm going to go to my forms, actually, and then I'm going to say I want to submit a new one. And it's going to be the bullying form. So now I'm the requester. I'm going to say I'm at Blue High School. Where's Blue High School? And put today's date. And it happened in the restroom. And the alleged offenders were, and I can put anybody else witness, no. And then I'll just check off the things that I want. And I'll describe the incident. Okay, so I've filled out my part of the form and I'm going to submit it. So based on that last change that I made, it goes next to the administrator. So I'm going to come over here and log off and log on as oh, yes, I forgot. So now I'm logged in as my principal. When I go over to review, well, I don't have the form that I meant to have, so I've done something wrong. But if I go to deny, I do have a place to put in a comment. So I can say why I'm denying it. And then always over on the right-hand side, you will see the history, and the person who created the form can also see that history. So they can see where it got stuck, and they can see whatever messages there are. So they can see that comment here. I'm just going to say no. That's why I'm denying it. Okay, so there's my rejection.
When you broke up for just a minute.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
No, that's okay. So they can type the message, and then
Yes.
goes back to the requester and allows them to fix it and then resubmit.
Well, they actually, once it's rejected, they will have to resubmit from the start. It doesn't go back to them. They don't get the option of editing that form, but they will see. So I have it rejected here. When I log back in as the administrator, I'm going to go back in as my administrator, go back to Formspace, and I'm going to look at my forms. And so if I had a form here, and I don't know who submitted that one, I can come over here and see what's the history. And if this was the one that Dumbledore had written no, I would be able to see up here under history, Dumbledore rejected, no was the reason why. And then I would see that reason, and I could go in and put in another form, do it over. But I don't have the ability to edit the form. I can recall it. If I realize I've messed up, I can recall it, but I can't go in and change it.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Nope, we're good for now.
Okay. All right. So I've talked about sections, talked about assigning sections to the workflow. I do want to talk about the free flow step just for a second. I'm going to go back into one of the forms that we had, and I mentioned that it is for those instances where it needs to go to a certain person based on some piece of evidence, but we don't have the logic built in. So I'm going to go into my textbook request form. Do I have questions here? Yes, I do. So I'm going to go over to the workflow and go see what we've got in here. And before it gets approved, I'm going to go in and say I need to add a step. It's going to be a free flow step. I'm going to move it up to the top. And it needs to go to the curriculum coordinator in charge of the subject area that's being requested for this textbook. So if it's a math textbook, it needs to go to the math coordinator. If it's a science textbook, it needs to go to the science coordinator. There's no way to put that logic in, so I'm going to select somebody, and that somebody is going to be me if I'm in here. Look, I am. So I'm going to be the free flow person. I am the gatekeeper. So what's going to happen on this particular step is it's going to come to me. I'm going to read the form, and there's going to be a box up at the top where the approve and deny are. There's going to be a box for me to click and add an email address. So I'm going to manually add in the email of the person who should get the form based on the data in the form, because we don't have the built-in logic to do that. But if you want it to be separated that way, a free flow step is a way that you can do that. Then as soon as that person that I send it to, as soon as they click approve or deny, they click deny, it goes back to the requester. But if they or it just stops in the process. If they click approve, then it automatically goes to the next step in my process, which would be Bruce. So this is a way, it sort of interrupts the workflow, sends it out to somebody as determined by the gatekeeper, and then it comes right back in to that next step in the workflow. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does to me.
Okay. And nobody else has asked questions, so hopefully it does to the
Ask me a question, yeah.
This is a great way to resolve some of the issues that we get with workflows, in that, you know, you have different people doing different jobs, and so it might need to go to this person sometimes, but it might need to go to another person other times, and a gatekeeper can make that determination and send the form where it needs to go without you having to have additional forms. You can keep the same form, the same database, but that one person is going to make the decision about how it gets routed under those special circumstances. Okay, last thing that I have on my agenda today are some tips and tricks. So I'm going to go over here and talk about form management and our community. And hopefully y'all know about the community. I'm going to talk about it first. We do have, when you're in the management or the manage tab, we do have an Eduphoria community button here that you can go in and see forms that have been shared by districts all across the state and outside of the state, some even. These are districts that have created things and they thought, you know what, this took me a long time and I bet somebody else needs to do it too, so they shared it. And you can also be a sharer of forms and have your stuff published in the community. So I'm going to show you how that would work. If I was looking for a district form, I can go in here and scroll down and say, oh, I was going to do a survey about campus climate. I wanted my staff to take this survey, and they did a pretty good job putting this together. I think I'm going to borrow that. All I have to do to put it into my system is click this button up here that says import document to. And then once it's in my system, I can take off the name of the school and put my name on there. I can add any other questions that I want, or if I wanted to change the words from strongly agree to something else, I could do that. So I can edit it however I want to after I import it. But you can find a lot of examples out there of forms that you might want to use and not have to start from scratch. So that's kind of a fast way to get started, is to look and see what's out there. If you have a form that you think is good that you've created, you always have the ability to share this document. So when I open up one of my forms that I created, up at the top, it's going to have this little icon that looks like our community icon, and it says share this document. And if I were to click it, it would put my document out there in the community for other people to use. So it's a great way. We put forms out there sometimes, and other districts put forms out there, and it's a great way not to have to start from scratch every single time. Okay, I'm going to go into my settings here on this particular form, and some of you may be the Formspace guru for your district, and so anytime anybody needs a form, they come to you and you build it. This is going to show you a way that you can get that monkey off your back at least a little bit. So I get a request for a form, and I go in and I give it a name. I don't even have to have any questions. I don't know if I have questions here. No, well, I have one question here, but I don't have to build the form itself. I create it, I give it a name, I go over to settings, and I can come down here and say, I want to add additional managers. And I will click on my little person here and say, Dumbledore was the one who wanted to do something with it. So I'm going to give him the right. Now, actually, Snape is the teacher. So Snape is going to be the manager. He's going to go in and write the questions. He's going to send the email out with the link or whatever he's going to do to share it to get that data in. He's going to do all the management. It's his form. I just built it. And then his principal is going to have the ability to go in and see reports. So you can give them reporting rights only, or you can give them full manage rights. And then I'm going to say select user. And now I have one user who can manage and one user who can report, and I'm done. Even though the form doesn't have any questions yet, my part is over. They can go in and build their questions. They can go in and set up their workflow. That doesn't have to be on a single person in a district. Now, if your principal says otherwise, I can't do anything about that. But in terms of the way Formspace works, you can create a form and assign it to somebody else, and then they can build that form and manage it. So they can do all the questions, all the workflow, all the data. They can do everything with that form. So that's an option for some of you. Also on this page is import document questions, which I love. When you're building a form, sometimes you have to do the same questions over and over again. And so you can do them a couple of different ways. When I go into import document questions, I can see all of my forms. So if I went, I can see, no, I don't want to see people. I want to see my forms. Well, if I typed in IMAT, it's going to pull up my IMAT request, and I can pull questions out of that. My problem is I don't ever remember where I used them before. So I created a form over here called Reusable Questions. And in that Reusable Questions form, I built a form that has a drop down for all the schools and departments in my district. We had 42 in my previous district, and I hated having to type them all in alphabetical order every time I made a form. So I built one that's school and district and one that's school only, because so many of our forms had to have one or the other of those as a drop down. You can build whatever questions you want and then reuse them from there. The only reason I put them in a separate form is because I can never remember what other forms I used which ones in. And I knew that they were all in this reusable questions form. So when I go to settings and I say I want to import document questions, then I go to reusable. Oh, it's going to make me put it the little asterisk. What does it do? What? That's just weird. Oh, I know why, because I'm in that form right now. It won't let me pull them from the place that I'm already in. So that's why it wasn't doing it for me. So when I go in and say I want to see reusable questions, then there they are, and I can go in and pull the one I want. And I can say, I just want the school department list. I say I want to import that one, and when I go back to questions, there it is.
We have a question. It says, does the form have to be active to retrieve questions from it?
No, in fact, if you look at my reusable questions form, it is in draft over here. It is not active. Nobody can see it but me. And so I built it and put it out there so that I know where all those questions are that I want to use over and over again, but I did not make it active. I can still go into a form that I'm working on and pull questions from it. Very good question. Any other questions about those reusable, importing those document questions? Okay. I also want to talk about this button right here that says clear document responses. This is something you might want to think about at the end of each year. I go into school districts all the time and I will see 2018-19 IMAT request form, 2019-20 IMAT request form, 2020-21 IMAT request form. So I'm going to see all the different years listed there because nobody knows what to do with that data at the end of the year. My recommendation is that you go into reports at the end of the year and you go to form analysis and you pick the form that you want and you come over here to print and you print it to Excel, export to Excel, not the summary, but export to Excel. If you do it to Excel, you'll get the pure data that you can then analyze however you want to, build your own pivot tables or charts and graphs or whatever you want to do with that data, and then you can store it somewhere as the file for that school year. So I have dumped everything from this whole year into an Excel spreadsheet. After I do that, I want to come back to manage, and I'm going to go to that form, and I'm going to go into the settings, and I'm going to say erase all document responses, and that's going to blank the form out. So I might do this sometime in June. I'm going to export all of the data out from this school year, then I'm going to blank it out, erase all the responses, and we'll start over with a blank form for the next school year. I didn't have to make a new form. I'm just getting the data out, clearing it out, and then I'm ready to start a new year. Okay, the last
that they were really complimentary of the reusable questions form, and I like that idea too for student forms in a way I hadn't thought of doing that. So that's a great.
It just helps. It helps me because I get lost in, was it in this one? No. Was it in that one?
Yeah.
No.
And was it on? Yep. Me too. Perfect.
Okay, good deal. The last thing that I wanted to show you is another sort of end of the year, beginning of the next year thing. I'm going to go to my Manage tab, and I'm going to go to Management, and I'm going to go to General Options. And one of the options you have here is a Replace User Utility. So if you have someone who leaves and they're being replaced by some other person, you can come in here and tell it anywhere. I'm going to come over here and say Dumbledore is leaving the district. Okay, so I'll find him and select him. Anything that Dumbledore did last year, I'm going to come over and select the person who is going to take his place. So I'll say any.
That's a terrible trade. We don't want Snape to replace Dumbledore.
I am aware it's a terrible trade, but Snape took over when Dumbledore was dead. Okay, so I'm being true to the novel here. And a Harry Potter nerd. So everywhere, any form, however many there were, that Dumbledore was in a step, he is going to be replaced with Snape with one click of the button. I just click that replace staff member and it's done in all of my forms. I'm pretending like I'm hearing uproarious applause in the background for that step, because that saves a ton of time on going in and updating all of those workflows. If you can go in and find that person and replace them with another person in every instance.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay, well, that is our agenda for today. We've talked about importing questions, some of our other settings, and assigning forms and erasing. Those are in my settings, and then the community as well. We would love your feedback. If you want to screenshot, that and give us a little feedback about today's webinar, we would appreciate it. And if you have any questions for us after the fact, you can always email training@eduphoria.net, and we will get back to you with an answer as soon as we can.
Okay, I do have one final question, and it's a good one. And you may throw it, but you can at least say yes or no and then get back to her.
Okay.
To search which forms are tied to an individual person.
You mean which forms are tied to the workflow, a person in the workflow?
Yeah, like if a person is in a workflow for a form, is there a way to search that? Yes, that's right.
There is not. The only thing that you can do is replace them. The system can find them, but there's not a way to report that out that I'm aware of. But whoever asked that question, if you will send an email to training@eduphoria.net, I will dig around and see if there is a way that I can't think of right now.
Yeah,
and I'll
like
get
in
back to you.
Or something. Yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. If there's some sort of search in there that I'm not thinking of right now. So if you'll send an email, we'll dig around and see what we can find.
Okay. Yeah, she said she would. So.
All right. Thank y'all very much, and I hope you have a great rest of the afternoon. And don't forget to go check out our online help section where we list our upcoming webinars so that you'll know what's coming up next.
Yeah, next week I'm doing cleaning up test types.
So that's big, yeah.
500. If you have more than 5 or 6 test types, you probably need to come to this webinar. So
awesome. Great advertising. All right. Well, y'all have a great afternoon.